Ave, you ever felt a moment so unexpected it burned itself into your memory forever? A glance that lasted too long, a word spoken too softly, a touch that was never meant to linger, yet it did. You tell yourself it's wrong, that it's harmless, but the truth haunts you in silence. They laughed the first time I called him my son-in-law. It was nothing serious, just a playful label, a nickname that came out of nowhere. He was around often, close enough to be considered family, though never bound by blood or law. Everyone teased him about how he blended into our circles so naturally, and I went along with it, half joking, half curious. The name stuck, and with time, it became a way of masking something I didn't want anyone else to notice. Because deep down, even then, I knew there was something different about the way he looked at me, the way his presence filled the quiet spaces. I thought no one else could. Life has a way of disguising loneliness beneath routine. I had my responsibilities, my place in the family, my role in the world, but beneath it all was a silence only I could hear. It wasn't loud, it wasn't painful, it was just there, an emptiness, a soft ache that I carried like an invisible weight. When he came around, that weight lifted, even if only for a moment. His laughter was effortless, his words light but meaningful, and his attention carried a warmth that reached parts of me I thought had gone cold. At first, I told myself it was nothing. He was simply kind, simply attentive, simply respectful in a way most people forgot to be. But the human heart doesn't care about excuses. It notices what it notices. It remembers what makes it beat faster, what makes it feel alive. And that was what began to happen to me. I found myself watching the clock, counting the moments until I might see him again. I found myself remembering little things he said long after the conversations had ended. The joke of calling him my son-in-law became a shield, a way to keep others from guessing the truth that even I was too afraid to admit. He had a way of noticing details others overlooked. If I wore something new, he'd notice before anyone else. If I seemed tired, he'd ask softly if I was okay. His questions were never casual. They were felt, sincere, and they stirred something inside me I hadn't experienced in years. It was dangerous, and I knew it, but danger doesn't always arrive with alarms. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as kindness. The first time our eyes lingered too long, I felt the world shift. It wasn't dramatic. No one else would have noticed, but inside me, the silence I'd carried cracked open. It terrified me. It thrilled me. And worst of all, it stayed with me long after I turned away. That moment haunted me, not because it was wrong, but because it reminded me that I was still capable of feeling something so strong, so unexpected. People think temptation begins with something grand, but it doesn't. It begins with details so small you almost dismiss them. The way a voice softens when it says your name. The way a smile seems meant only for you. The way a simple touch, accidental, fleeting, can replay in your mind as if it were something more. That's how it began for me. Not in scandal, not in chaos, but in quiet moments that grew roots inside my memory. I told myself over and over that I was imagining it, that I was only starved for attention, only projecting my own emptiness onto someone who didn't mean anything by it. But then there would be another glance, another word, another silence heavy with unspoken meaning, and all my reasoning would unravel. What haunted me most wasn't just the possibility of crossing a line, but the way my body and soul responded before my mind had a chance to resist. The irony of calling him my son-in-law became sharper with time. What had once been a harmless joke now felt like a secret I carried alone. No one else could understand what the words meant to me anymore. They weren't just a nickname. They were a mask covering the truth of my own awakening. Each time I said it out loud, I felt the weight of the hidden meaning pressing harder inside my chest. It wasn't love, Not yet, but it was something dangerously close. A stirring, a longing, a flame that flickered in the quiet corners of my life. It wasn't about him alone. It was about what he awakened in me, the reminder that I was more than the roles I played, more than the responsibilities I carried. I was still a woman with a heart that could ache, a soul that could long, and a body that could remember what it meant to feel alive. I knew I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't define, and once crossed, there would be no turning back. But even before the line was drawn, I felt the haunting begin, not as a punishment, but as a whisper that change was coming. Whether it would lead me toward ruin or redemption, I didn't yet know. All I knew was that the silence inside me had been broken, and I could no longer pretend not to hear the sound of my own heart, that I should have walked away the moment I felt the shift, but life rarely gives us such clean choices. What began as glances too long to ignore soon turned into words heavy with meaning. It was never spoken outright, never declared, yet the truth hung in the air between us, thick and undeniable. He crossed the line not with an act, but with a confession tucked inside a simple sentence. You deserve more than the world gives you. I remember how my breath caught, how my pulse betrayed me, how every part of me recognized what those words really meant. That moment was enough to change everything. Once a boundary is crossed, even in silence, you can't return to the innocence that existed before. Every interaction afterward felt charged, every word layered with what we dared not say. His presence was no longer harmless. It lingered on my skin long after he left the room, echoing in places I thought were numb. For the first time in years, I felt noticed, chosen, wanted, and though I knew it was dangerous, I couldn't stop myself from basking in it. It was subtle, the way he tested the waters. A touch at the elbow that lasted a fraction too long. A look that carried a depth no one else seemed to notice. A laugh that belonged only to me, even when others were around. He never declared himself, yet every gesture spoke volumes. And I, against my better judgment, let it feed me, because deep down I was starving not for him alone, but for the way he made me feel. Pleasure is not always physical. Sometimes it's in the rush of knowing someone sees you, truly sees you, when you've spent years feeling invisible. Sometimes it's in the comfort of hearing your thoughts echoed back by another soul, like they've been waiting inside you all along. That was the line he crossed. He entered the hidden spaces of my heart without asking, and once inside, he refused to leave. I hated him for it. I loved him for it. I hated myself for not wanting to resist. The haunting began in the smallest ways. At night, when the house grew quiet, I replayed his words as if they were written just for me. In the morning, I caught myself smiling at the memory of something simple, like the way he looked at me while I poured a cup of tea. The details etched themselves into my mind until they felt larger than life, until they consumed the silence I used tea. The haunting grew heavier with time. What once felt like a secret thrill slowly became an ache I carried everywhere. I could not escape it, no matter how I tried to bury it beneath daily tasks, conversations, or obligations. His words replayed without permission. His presence lingered even in his absence. The more I resisted, the stronger it pulled me back. Pleasure had become a shadow, following me, reminding me of what I had allowed, what I had tasted, what I could no longer forget. There is a cruelty in memory when it is tied to desire. It sharpens every detail, keeps it alive, refuses to let it fade. I remembered the way his hand brushed mine as if it had just happened. I remembered the way his voice dipped low when no one else was listening. I remembered how his eyes held me longer than they should, daring me to admit what was already true. These moments lived inside me, haunting not only my nights, but my waking hours, stealing focus from everything else. I thought about him when I shouldn't have. I measured others against him without realizing I was doing it. He became the silent comparison, the standard of attention and warmth I had been missing. It wasn't fair, and I knew it. But once a heart is awakened, it refuses to accept the numbness it once settled for. He had crossed the line, but it was me who carried the aftermath, me who bore the weight of pleasure turned into longing, me who faced the mirror each morning knowing that part of me had changed forever. The haunting was not only in memory, but in the fear of discovery. Every time we were near each other, I wondered if others could see it, the unspoken current between us, the quiet fire smoldering just beneath the surface. I became hyper-aware, cautious, careful with every word, every gesture. Yet at the same time, I couldn't resist the pull. The risk only deepened the desire, sharpened the edges of the bond we try to keep hidden. What others saw as ordinary, I felt as dangerous. What they dismissed as playful, I carried as secret truth. The pleasure haunted me because it was bound to guilt. They were twins, inseparable. Every moment of joy was followed by a shadow of shame. Every spark of warmth was paired with a chill of fear. And still, I returned to it in my thoughts, willingly, hungrily. The human heart does not always crave what is safe. Sometimes it clings to what it knows it shouldn't have, precisely because it feels forbidden. That was my prison and my freedom at once. Nights became the hardest. Silence amplified everything I tried to suppress. I would lie awake, staring into darkness, reliving every word, every look, every brush of contact. My body remembered what my mind told me to forget. I told myself this would pass, that time would dull the edges, that distance would cure the ache. But distance only sharpened the hunger, and time only deepened the memory. The haunting was no longer just a reminder. It became a part of me, stitched into my thoughts, etched into my emotions. And still, beneath the torment, there was a strange gratitude, because the pleasure reminded me of something I thought I had lost forever, the ability to feel alive. For so long, I had buried myself in silence, convinced that my season of passion was over. But he proved me wrong. He awakened me, disrupted me, unsettled me in ways I could not explain. It was dangerous, it was wrong, but it was real. And reality, once tasted, refuses to be forgotten. I began to ask myself questions I couldn't answer. Was this temptation meant to destroy me or to teach me something about myself? Was it punishment for years of denying my own needs, or was it a gift wrapped in disguise? Could I carry the haunting without letting it consume me? Could I turn the fire into something that wouldn't burn me alive? These questions circled endlessly, each one haunting me more than the last. There were days when I longed to confess it all, to rip off the mask and let the truth breathe. But fear held me back. Fear of judgment, fear of consequences, fear of what it would mean for everyone around me. And so I kept the secret, carried the haunting silently, smiled as if everything were the same, while inside I battled storms no one else could see. The line had been crossed long ago, yet the haunting kept dragging me back to that moment again and again. It wasn't just what he did, it was how it made me feel, how it transformed me, how it stripped away the layers I had built to survive. I could no longer hide from the truth. I was alive in a way I hadn't been for years, and the cost of that awakening was the endless echo of pleasure that refused to leave me. The haunting was not only about him. It was about me, about my own hunger, my own longing, my own discovery that desire doesn't fade with age or circumstance. It waits, quiet and patient, until someone or something dares to awaken it. And once awakened, it never fully goes back to sleep. That was my truth, my burden, my gift. A line had been crossed, and the haunting had become my companion, my reminder, my curse and my strange salvation. The haunting did not end, but over time it changed. At first it was sharp, consuming, impossible to escape. It filled every silence, colored every thought, turned every ordinary moment into a reminder of what had been awakened. But slowly the edges softened. I began to see it less as a punishment and more as a mirror showing me the truth about myself I had long ignored. The line he crossed was not only about him stepping into forbidden territory. It was about me realizing I had built walls so high I forgot what it meant to feel alive within them. The pleasure that once tormented me became a lesson. It revealed my hunger for connection, my longing for tenderness, my deep need to be seen as more than the roles I carried. I had lived for others for so long that I had almost erased myself from my own story. He reminded me that I still existed not only as a mother, not only as a caretaker, but as a woman with a heart that still craved warmth and a soul that still longed for fire. That revelation haunted me, yes, but it also freed me. I realized that what I wanted was not truly him, but the reflection of myself I found in his attention. He awakened a part of me that had been neglected, but that part did not belong to him. It belonged to me. The haunting became less about his gestures and more about the truth they uncovered. I had the right to feel whole again, the right to seek love that nourished instead of drained, the right to embrace life instead of merely enduring it. There is power in acknowledging a truth, even when it hurts. I stopped running from the memories. I stopped pretending they meant nothing. I accepted that they changed me, and in that acceptance, I found peace. The haunting did not vanish, but it lost its grip. Instead of chains, it became a compass. Instead of torment, it became a guide. It pointed me toward the kind of love I deserved, the kind of life I wanted to create for myself, the kind of future that could replace longing with fulfillment. I learned that boundaries matter, but so do awakenings. Sometimes the wrong kind of desire exposes the right kind of need. Sometimes a forbidden spark is not meant to be fanned into flame, but to remind us that we are capable of burning at all. What haunted me most was not the line he crossed, but the silence I had accepted before him. Once I saw it clearly, I knew I could no longer return to the emptiness I once carried so quietly.